10 Toxic Relationships Explained. Why we stay in the loop. 1. The narcissist, the egocentric. Everything revolves around them. In a relationship with a narcissist, your role slowly shifts from partner to audience. Their needs, their opinions, and their emotions dominate the space. They crave admiration constantly, but rarely offer genuine empathy in return. At first, their confidence can feel magnetic. They often appear charming, ambitious, and self-assured. But over time, the imbalance becomes clear. Your struggles are minimized while their frustrations become major events. You may find yourself adjusting your behavior just to avoid criticism or dismissal. The relationship becomes one-sided. Instead of mutual support, it turns into emotional maintenance, where your main task is keeping their ego satisfied. 2. The gaslighter, the reality bender. Gaslighting is psychological manipulation that slowly distorts your sense of reality. A gaslighter convinces you that your memories, perceptions, or feelings cannot be trusted. When you confront them about something they did, the response is immediate. That never happened. You're imagining things. You're being dramatic. At first, you defend your memory, but over time, constant denial creates confusion. You begin second-guessing yourself. Maybe you misunderstood. Maybe you're overreacting. This is how control develops. Once someone convinces you that your own perception is unreliable, they gain enormous influence over the narrative. The conversation stops being about what happened and becomes about whether anything happened at all. 3. The controller, the dictator. Control in relationships rarely begins with obvious domination. It usually starts disguised as concern. Why are you talking to them? I just worry about you. You shouldn't wear that around people. Gradually, these suggestions become expectations. The controller monitors who you spend time with, what you wear, where you go, and sometimes how you spend money. Friends and family may slowly disappear from your daily life because they create problems. Your world becomes smaller, while the controller's influence grows larger. The goal is not partnership. It is authority. When independence disappears, the relationship stops being equal. And once isolation sets in, the controller becomes the loudest voice in your life. 4. The love bomber, the overwhelmer. The love bomber begins the relationship with overwhelming affection. They shower you with compliments, attention, gifts, and constant communication. Everything feels intense and magical. They talk about the future quickly, sometimes within days or weeks. You may hear statements like, "You're the best thing that's ever happened to me," or "I've never felt this way before." The pace feels exciting, but that speed is the warning sign. Love bombing builds emotional attachment rapidly. Once that attachment forms, the dynamic often changes. The affection suddenly becomes inconsistent or disappears entirely. And because the beginning felt so powerful, you chase that early version of the relationship, hoping the warmth will return. 5. The stonewaller, the silent wall. The stonewaller uses silence instead of communication. When conflict appears, they shut down completely. Conversations stop. Questions go unanswered. Eye contact disappears. You ask what's wrong. They shrug. You try again. They ignore you. Silence becomes their weapon. Humans naturally seek resolution when conflict occurs. When someone refuses to communicate, uncertainty becomes painful. Eventually, you may start apologizing or taking responsibility just to restore conversation, even if the problem was never yours. But the stonewaller rarely addresses the issue. They simply wait until time passes, then behave as if nothing happened, and the unresolved tension quietly remains. 6. The intermittent reinforcer, the gambler. This relationship dynamic works like gambling. Most of the time, the relationship feels frustrating, distant, or emotionally draining, but occasionally, unexpectedly, the other person becomes affectionate, supportive, or kind. Those rare moments feel powerful because they are unpredictable. Psychologists call this intermittent reinforcement, one of the strongest behavioral conditioning patterns. The brain becomes hooked on the possibility of reward. You start believing that if you just try harder, things might improve. Maybe they're changing. Maybe the good version of them is finally returning. But the pattern continues. The bad days dominate, while good moments appear just often enough to keep hope alive. 7. The parasite, the energy vampire. The parasite relies on you for everything: emotional support, financial stability, constant reassurance, and problem solving. At first, it may feel like you're simply helping someone you care about, but over time, the balance becomes clear. You give, they take. When you need support, they often have excuses. I'm going through a lot right now. You're stronger than me. I don't know what I'd do without you. The relationship becomes exhausting because the energy only flows in one direction. Healthy relationships involve mutual investment. But with a parasite, your resources, time, attention, and emotional energy are constantly consumed while very little is returned. 8. The walking on eggshells, the volatile. In volatile relationships, emotional stability becomes unpredictable. One moment everything feels calm. The next moment, a small disagreement triggers anger or an explosive reaction. Over time, you begin monitoring everything you say and do. You watch your tone. You carefully choose your words. You avoid certain topics. This constant self-monitoring is what people describe as walking on eggshells. The relationship becomes less about honest communication and more about preventing conflict. Eventually, you may stop expressing your true thoughts entirely, because silence feels safer than honesty. 9. The competitor, the rival. Healthy partners celebrate each other's success, but the competitor sees achievement as a threat. When something good happens to you, a promotion, recognition, or personal milestone, the reaction often feels uncomfortable. Instead of support, the conversation shifts. They compare themselves. They minimize your accomplishment. They redirect attention to their own achievements. Sometimes the rivalry is subtle. Sometimes it becomes openly dismissive. But the message is clear. Your success creates insecurity. In extreme cases, they may even criticize your ambitions or discourage opportunities. Because in their mindset, relationships are competitions, and someone always has to win. 10. The guilt tripper, the martyr. The guilt tripper uses your empathy as leverage. Whenever you attempt to set a boundary or express a need, they immediately position themselves as the victim. I guess I just care more than you. I always sacrifice everything. You're hurting me. The conversation stops being about the issue you raised. Instead, you find yourself defending your character. Are you selfish? Are you ungrateful? Are you abandoning them? This emotional shift makes boundaries difficult to maintain. The guilt tripper knows that compassionate people struggle with causing pain, and that hesitation is exactly what they rely on. Your needs fade into the background while their emotional narrative takes center stage.